Algebra 2, Chapter 5, Section 5, Quadratic Equations. What we're going to learn in this lesson is we're going to learn to solve quadratic equations by factoring and finding square roots. Alright, we've already learned the standard form of quadratic function, or the quadratic form, is ax squared plus bx plus c. Now the equation, we're just going to set equal to 0. We can solve some quadratic equations in standard form by factoring the quadratic and then using the zero product property. A long time ago in Algebra 1, we learned if a times b equals 0, then a or b could equal to 0. So if we have two factored terms set equal to 0, in this example x plus 3 times x minus 7 equals 0, then x plus 3 could equal 0, or x minus 7 could equal 0. So let's just go through a problem in your notes. And if you don't have your notes, go ahead and download those from Moodle. So I got 2x squared minus 11 equals negative 15. Okay, we're going to make some easy steps on this. So write your notes and take your time. Number 1, set it equal to 0. So we're going to add 15 to each side of our equation. So it's going to be 2x squared minus 11x plus 15 equals 0. Okay, our second step, once we've set it equal to 0 and we put it in standard form, we're going to factor completely. Okay, looking at this example, there's no GCF, no greatest common factor amongst the terms, so we'll go ahead and go x factor and see if we can do any work there. So x factors are a times c value and our b value on bottom. So our a value is 2, our c value is 15, so that'd be 2 times 15 and be 30. My b value is negative 11. So I need to find two numbers that have a product of 30 and a sum of negative 11. So the factors of 30 would be negative 1, negative 30. That would give me a sum of negative 31. That doesn't work. Negative 2, negative 15. That gives me a sum of negative 17. That doesn't work. Negative 3, negative 10. That gives me a sum of negative 13. That doesn't work. 4 doesn't go into 30 nicely. Negative 5 does. So negative 5, negative 6, negative 11. Bingo. So we found our factors of negative 5 and negative 6. Since our a value is not 1, we're just going to replace that negative 11x with the two factor terms and rewrite. So this is all still step 2. 2x squared minus 6x minus 5x plus 15 equals 0. Okay, let's factor this down if we can. Again, remember that negative 6x and negative 5x are just coming from our x factors. So what can we factor between 2x squared minus 6x? Well, the GCF is 2x. What is left is x minus 3. On the right side, we can factor out a negative 5, and we're going to get x minus 3 again. All of this is still equal to 0. So since our two terms are the same, we can group this by distributive property. So we could rewrite this as 2x minus 5 times x minus 3 equals 0. So there we go. Now we have factored it. Step 3. Set each group equal to 0 and solve. So we're going to set each side equal to 0. This is how I do that. 2x minus 5 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to add 5 to each side, so I get 2x equals 5. Divide each side by 2, so x equals 5 over 2. There's an answer on the left. On the right side, we're going to add 3 to each side, so we're going to get x equals 3. So there you go. There are your two possible answers for the first example. X equals 5 halves and x equals 3. And if you wanted to check yourself, you could throw this into the equation, the initial equation, and see how it works. All right, moving on. Solve x squared plus 7x minus 18 equals 0. Well, step 1 was we're going to put it in standard form. So we got x squared plus 7x equals 18. We're going to subtract 18 each side, so we're going to get x squared plus 7x squared minus 18 equals 0. All right, step 2 was factor. So we're going to make an x. Our a times c value is negative 18. Our b value is 7. So I need two numbers, one negative, one positive, that have a product of 18 and a sum of 7. So that's going to be 9 and negative 2. Now if you remember, if our a value is 1, we can just rewrite this as x minus 9, x plus 9 times x minus 2 equals 0. Now, step 3 was set this equal to 0 and solve. So x plus 9 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. Subtract 9 each side, x equals negative 9, or x equals 2. So the answer would be A. Okay, going to the next one. Solve 2x squared plus 4x equals 6. Step 1, get everything on one side of the equation, simplify it the best we can. So I get 2x squared plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. Step 2 is factor. Well, before we factor, what can I reduce out of this? I can divide it by 2. I got a GCF of 2, so I'm going to divide each side of this equation, remember it's an equation now, by 2. So I'm going to simplify this. So 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. 4x divided by 2 is 2x. And negative 6 divided by 2 is 3x. And 0 divided by 2 is still 0. So now I've got an answer. Or at least I got an equation. My a times c value is negative 3 and my b value is 2. So I need to find two numbers that have a product of negative 3 and a sum of 2. So 3 and negative 1 seem to do that. So I can rewrite this as x plus 3 times x minus 1 equals 0. We set each side equal to 0. X plus 3 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. X is going to equal negative 3. X is going to equal 1. Okay. What do you notice? The root is just the opposite of what we factored. The root is just what we ought. Just the opposite of what we just factored. Alright, so the answer in that one, obviously, if it's negative 3 and 1, would be A. Okay, 1C. 16x squared equals 8x. Okay, well, step 1, set it equal to 0. 16x squared minus 8x equals 0. Okay, is there any GCF, anything I can factor out? Yep, I can factor out an 8x. So when I factor out an 8x, I'm going to get 2x minus 1 equals 0. Okay. Set each side equal to 0 and solve. 8x equals 0. Divide each side by 8. X equals 0. 2x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 each side. 2x equals 1. Divide each side by 2. X equals 1 half. So our solution is x equals 0 and 1 half. Okay. Moving on. Finding square roots. Notice our b value is 0. Remember, what are we ultimately trying to do? We're always trying to solve for our variable. So you look, how many terms does our variable in? Just one. So let's simplify. So I got 5x squared minus 180 equals 0. Okay. I'm just solving with one variable. Let's add it to one side. 5x squared equals 180. Divide each side by 5. X squared equals 36. Square root each side. X equals plus or minus square root of 36. So x equals plus or minus 6. Okay. Again, the variable is only in one term, so isolate the variable and solve. Isolate the variable and solve. All right, next example. Step 1, notice it's a perfect square with one term, so rewrite it as 4x squared equals 25. Divide each side by 4, so x squared equals 4 over 25. 25 over 4. Square root it, so x equals plus or minus the square root of 25 over 4, which would be the square root of 25. over the square root of 4. So x is going to equal plus or minus 5/2. Okay, 2b. Solve by finding the square roots. So I got 3x squared equals 24. I'm going to divide each side by 3, so I'm going to get x squared equals 8. I'm going to square root each side, so x equals plus or minus the square root of 8. Well, the square root of 8 is going to be the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, which is going to be the same thing as 2 square root of 2. Okay, remember how we broke it down to our prime factors and solved? That's exactly how we do it. So the answer in this one would be B. Alright, 2c. X squared minus 1/4 equals 0. Add 1/4 each side. X squared equals 1 over 4. Square root each side. X equals plus or minus the square root of 1 over 4, which could be rewritten as plus or minus the square root of 1 over the square root of 4, which could be rewritten as plus or minus 1 over 2. Okay, let's follow the steps, pay attention, take your time. Alright, this one I'm going to just talk through you and then we're going to work the last one. Smoke jumpers are in a free fall from the time they jump out of a plane until they open the chute. The function y equals negative 16t squared plus 1600 models the jumper's height, y, in feet, at t seconds for a jump 1600 feet. How long does the jumper free fall? Until the parachute opens at 1,000 feet. Well, we're going to replace our y value with 1,000. So 1,000 is going to equal negative 16t squared plus 1,600. Alright, we only have a variable in one term, so we're going to isolate it. So we're going to subtract 1,600 each side. So I'm going to get negative 600 equals negative 16t squared. We're going to divide each side by 16. I'm going to get t squared equals 37.5. Our t value, once you square each side, is plus or minus 6.1 seconds. Since you can't have negative seconds, we're going to make it positive. So the jumper's going to jump for about, or free fall for about 6.1 seconds. Alright, same concept. The smoker's going to jump for 1,400 feet. Find the time in which the jumper is in free fall if the parachute opens at 1,000. So our y value would be 1,000. So we could rewrite this as 1,000 equals negative 16t squared plus 1,400. Subtract 400 each side. You get negative 400 equals negative 16t squared. Divide each side by 16. You're going to get 25 equals t squared. Square root each side, so 5 is going to equal t. Okay? Pretty straightforward stuff. All right.